I was never the kind of girl who made bold moves. I preferred emails over phone calls, stayed late to finish slides nobody would look at twice, and never once wore lipstick to work. I played it safe in life, in love, and especially in my brand new job at Maddox Enterprises, a towering tech empire ruled by the one and only Julian Maddox, the youngest billionaire CEO in the city, and easily the most untouchable man I'd ever met. That is, until the night I almost ruined everything with a single text. It was nearly midnight, and I was curled up in bed, exhausted after pulling a 16-hour day finalizing the budget presentation. My best friend Rachel had been blowing up my phone with memes, and in a haze of sleep deprivation, she texted me something so ridiculous it made me laugh out loud. "Bet he's secretly into you. Send him this and watch him melt." She followed it with a screenshot of a sultry message, something completely out of character for me. "If I showed up at your door wearing nothing but a smile, what would you do?" I copied it. I meant to paste it back to her with a sarcastic, "Ha, yeah, right." But my thumb betrayed me. It happened in one horrifying instant. I tapped the wrong name. My fingers were faster than my brain. Before I could double-check, I hit send and realized with a sickening chill in my spine that I had just texted it to Julian Maddox, my boss, my billionaire CEO, the man who once gave a keynote speech about professionalism being non-negotiable. I screamed into my blanket like it could rewind time. I considered quitting on the spot, selling my phone, my apartment, my identity, disappearing off the grid forever. I typed, deleted, retyped an apology. Should I pretend it was a joke? A dare? A virus? Then my phone buzzed. One new message from him. "When?" That was it. One word, one syllable, but it made my heart slam so loud in my chest I swore the neighbors could hear it. Not, "Who is this?" Not, "Excuse me?" Not even report to HR in the morning. Just, "When?" For a full minute, I didn't move. I couldn't. Was he serious? Was he testing me? Was he setting a trap? Or worse, did he want me to answer? I stared at the glowing screen, his name sitting there like a bomb waiting to go off. Julian Maddox, CEO, billionaire. The man who hadn't said a full sentence to me since my first week on the job, had just replied to my accidental flirtation like it was a question he expected an answer to. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or throw my phone out the window. Instead, I replied, just 2 words, "I'm sorry." And I waited. 10 seconds. 30, a full minute. No response, just silence, and the terrifying knowledge that when I walked into the office the next morning, I wouldn't be the invisible girl behind spreadsheets anymore. I'd be the girl who accidentally propositioned the most powerful man in the building. And for some reason, he didn't say no. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the message, and his reply, just one word, "When?" That was it, and yet it kept echoing in my mind, louder than any reprimand he could have given. I rehearsed 1,000 apologies before sunrise, and still felt completely unprepared when I finally walked into the towering glass building that was Maddox Enterprises. My heels clicked too loud on the marble floor, my coffee tasted like mud, and the receptionist barely looked up when I passed, which somehow made me feel worse. Was she being normal or avoiding eye contact? Did the entire building know? Did he show someone? Did he laugh? I stepped into the elevator, heart pounding, and stared at my own reflection in 24, first real job, brown hair in a bun, cheap blouse, and panic radiating off my skin like heat. I didn't look like the kind of woman who sent messages like that. I didn't even know who that woman was. "Good morning," said Marcus from accounting, stepping in beside me. I jumped like I'd been caught stealing. He smiled awkwardly, eyes flicking toward the floor buttons, then away again. Was that a glance or a judgment? My floor came, and I practically sprinted to my desk, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I kept my head down, typing gibberish into a spreadsheet just to keep my hands busy. But my ears were sharp, waiting for something. A cough, a whisper, a sudden tap on the shoulder. Nothing. Hours passed. Lunchtime came, then afternoon. Still nothing. I told myself to breathe. Maybe he thought it was a joke. Maybe he deleted it. Maybe he didn't even remember my name, but I knew that wasn't true. Because Julian Maddox remembered everything, everyone. Even if he barely spoke, barely smiled, barely looked at you twice, he was always watching. I'd seen him catch a typo on a quarterly report during a 10-minute briefing. I'd seen him recite employee names from departments he didn't even oversee. He ran a billion-dollar empire like a chessboard, calculating and quiet. Ruthless, some said. Brilliant, most agreed. And I had just texted him a line that sounded like it came straight out of a bad romance novel. I joined Maddox Enterprises only 4 months ago, after landing a spot in their highly competitive management trainee program. My degree was fresh, my suit was thrifted, and my only ambition was to do well enough to stick around. I didn't have dreams of climbing the ladder or making a name for myself. I just wanted a place to belong, to survive, to build something. Julian Maddox, though, he was on another planet. He wasn't just wealthy, he was legendary. The media called him the Ghost CEO because of how rarely he gave interviews, how little he appeared at events. But when he did, the world watched. His dark suits, his colder eyes, that voice that never needed to raise in volume to command attention. It was said he once fired an entire marketing agency with a single email. No drama, just precision. He terrified me, but he fascinated me too. And now I'd seen a side of him that no article had ever mentioned, the side that answered my text, and didn't shut it down. It wasn't until just before 5 o'clock that I saw him. He walked past our open concept bullpen on the way to his private elevator. My breath caught in my throat, like it always did, when he appeared, all sleek lines and impossible calm. Everyone froze a little when he passed. Conversations hushed, eyes followed. But this time, he stopped. Right beside my desk, my stomach dropped. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. He just set a file down in front of me and said, low and controlled, "Come to the top floor at 6. Bring this." Then he walked away. No one said anything for a full 5 seconds after he left. Then Marcus leaned in and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. I lied, because nothing was okay. I stared at the folder like it might bite me. Then I opened it. Inside was a basic project summary, a proposal draft I hadn't even worked on. There was no reason for me to bring it upstairs, no reason at all, unless he just wanted an excuse. 6 o'clock, just me and him. My brain screamed to run, but my fingers were already gripping the folder tighter. At exactly 6 o'clock, I stood in front of the executive elevator, holding that folder like it was a shield. My palms were sweaty. My heart hadn't slowed since lunch. This was the top floor, the one reserved for board meetings, sealed-off client negotiations, and of course, Julian Maddox's private office that practically had its own gravitational field. The elevator ride felt like a descent into something irreversible. I kept my eyes on the stainless steel doors, watching my faint reflection. My lips looked pale. My blazer didn't fit right. I had never felt more out of place. The doors opened silently, to a floor bathed in soft lighting and minimalist design. Everything was glass and stone and air. It was intimidating and beautiful, like the man who owned it. His assistant greeted me with a polite nod, didn't ask why I was there, and simply gestured toward his office. I pushed the door gently, and there he was. Julian stood near the wall of glass, looking out over the city skyline, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn when I walked in, just spoke in that calm, steady voice. "I'm assuming you brought the folder." "Yes," I said quietly, stepping closer, though I wasn't sure which section you wanted me to review. I didn't. I froze. He finally turned and his eyes landed on mine. Cold steel, with something unreadable underneath. I asked you to bring it because I wanted to see how you'd respond, he said, not to the folder, to me. I gripped the edge of the document tighter. About the message. I swear it was an accident. I was texting my friend. I didn't mean to. He held up a hand. I believe you. That stunned me more than anything. But, he continued, taking a few steps forward, the way you reacted told me more than the message itself. You didn't try to deny it. You didn't pretend you were hacked. You apologized, and you didn't follow up. I didn't know what to say, I whispered. His eyes softened, but only slightly. Most people would have tried to leverage the moment, twist it into opportunity. You didn't. Because I was mortified. That too, he said, and a hint of something, maybe a smile, flickered across his face. But also because you have something I don't see often around here. Restraint. I didn't know what to say. My voice felt trapped somewhere in my chest. He gestured toward the chairs near the window. Sit. I did. Hesitantly. He sat across from me, elbows resting on his knees, gaze locked to mine. I need someone to manage a high-profile event for our upcoming product launch, he said. It's off-site, 3 days. You be working closely with me. I blinked. Me? You? He repeated. Because you're one of the few people here I can't predict. I don't have senior-level experience. That's what makes you interesting. I didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning. He stood, walked back toward his desk, picked up his phone, glanced at it, then turned it face down. I've received more than a few suggestive messages over the years, he said quietly. Most of them intentional. Yours was different. I swallowed hard, because it was pathetic, because it was sincere. That word landed heavy in the room. I couldn't tell if he was complimenting me or exposing me. You don't have to take the assignment, he said. I won't hold it against you. I'll do it, I heard myself say, even as my brain screamed, what are you doing? He nodded. We leave Friday morning. My assistant will coordinate the details. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. Thank you, I said, almost too softly to hear. Just as I reached the door, he spoke again. By the way, when I asked when, I wasn't mocking you. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I didn't think you were, I said, without turning around. Good, he said, because I wasn't joking. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stepped out of the office, the door clicking softly shut behind me. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Meetings, preparation, coordination. I barely slept, barely ate, and yet time seemed to blur. Every time Julian walked into a room, the air changed. He didn't flirt, he didn't follow up, but he was watching, every time. And I hated how much I noticed the launch event was being held at a luxury resort 2 hours outside the city. It was modern, sleek, and completely isolated. The perfect place for press coverage, investor schmoozing, and scandal. Our team arrived Thursday night. Julian's car pulled in behind ours, and when he stepped out, I felt that same ridiculous jolt in my chest like I had when I saw his reply for the first time. Dinner that night was formal. Guests, executives, designers. I wore a borrowed dress from a coworker, sleek, black, and dangerously close to showing more than I was used to. Julian sat across the table from me, barely spoke, barely smiled, but his eyes, they never left mine. And when dessert was served, he leaned forward slightly, voice low enough that only I could hear. Still haven't answered my question. My breath caught. I stared at him. And this time, I didn't apologize. I should have said something clever, or professional, or at least something neutral that didn't make it obvious I was burning from the inside out. But when Julian said those words, still haven't answered my question, the rest of the world faded, All I managed to say was, "Is this part of the project too?" He didn't laugh. He didn't look away. "No," he said simply. "This part's just for me." My chest tightened. He leaned back in his chair, picked up his wine glass, and let the conversation around us swell again, as though he hadn't just lit a fire in the center of my world. The rest of the evening moved in slow motion. He kept a professional distance, but I felt it, that invisible thread tying every glance, every movement back to me. When I stood to present a brief welcome speech, I felt his eyes tracking me across the room. When I fumbled over a line, I caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. But it wasn't until after midnight, when I stepped out onto the empty terrace for air, that everything changed. The cold mountain breeze was a shock after the stuffy event hall. I leaned on the railing, willing my heart to slow down. The silence was calming, until it wasn't. "You did well tonight." His voice was unmistakable. I turned slowly. Julian stood a few feet away, his tux jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie loose. He looked nothing like the unreachable CEO I'd watched from a distance all these months. He looked human, real. I was nervous, I admitted. "You didn't look it," he said. "Good, I practiced in the mirror." That earned a quiet chuckle. A rare sound. He took a step closer. "You surprise me." "How?" "You don't try to impress me. You don't trip over yourself like most people around me do." "That's because I'm usually trying not to trip over my own shoes." He tilted his head. "You make light of everything." "Not everything," I said quietly. There was a pause, a deep one. Then he looked at me and said, "I haven't dated anyone seriously in years." I blinked. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because I want to explain why I didn't ignore your message, why I didn't report it, or fire you, or pretend it never happened." I felt something shift in my chest. "You wanted me to respond?" "Yes, even though it was a mistake, especially because it was." He moved to stand beside me, both of us leaning on the terrace rail now, facing the darkness dotted with distant city lights. "You ever notice how the most honest things happen by accident?" he said. I didn't know how to answer that. My fingers tightened around the metal rail. "You think I'm cold," he said, "that I keep people at a distance. And you're right. I built this empire by being 2 steps ahead of everyone, by reading intentions, avoiding distractions, eliminating threats, and somewhere in all that, I stopped knowing how to be surprised. And I surprised you?" He looked at me. "You terrified me." That stunned me more than any confession so far. "Why?" "Because I couldn't figure you out. 1 minute you're shy and practical, the next you're texting me something that made me stop breathing." My cheeks flushed. "I told you." "I know it was a mistake, but that didn't make it any less real." We stood there in silence, the air between us thick with everything unspoken. Then he added, almost too quietly, "Do you know what I did after I got that message?" I shook my head. "I didn't sleep," he said. "I reread it, over and over, trying to decide whether you were bold or reckless, or if it was a sign I should stop pretending I wasn't already watching you." That knocked the breath from my lungs. "You were watching me? For weeks. Why?" He turned to face me fully. "Because you're the only person in this company who makes me forget I'm supposed to keep my distance." And then, the space between us vanished. His hand brushed mine. Slowly, cautiously. When I didn't pull away, he took another step closer. I could feel the heat radiating from him, see the tension in his jaw, the hesitation in his eyes, like he was giving me every chance to stop this, to turn away. I looked up at him and whispered, "If I answer your question, what happens next?" He didn't smile. He just leaned in and said, "Everything changes." That night, nothing happened that would make headlines. No one kissed, no one crossed a line, but something had shifted. something irreversible. I went back to my room with 1,000 new questions, and one very dangerous truth. I wanted this. Him. Us. Whatever it was we were starting. And that terrified me, because no matter how sincere his words sounded, he was still my CEO, still a billionaire who could crush careers with a look, still someone who didn't let people in. What if I was just the latest distraction? What if the moment passed and I was left holding pieces of something that had never really belonged to me? But deep down, I didn't think it was like that. Because when I looked into his eyes that night, I didn't see a man who wanted control. I saw someone who had finally lost it. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want it back. The following week felt like a dream I wasn't sure I had permission to live in. Julian didn't say a word to anyone about what happened on the terrace, but he didn't avoid me either. In meetings, he addressed me directly. At lunch, he nodded for me to sit near him. It was subtle, discreet, but every glance he gave me told a deeper story. Something growing, something real. I told myself to be careful, that this couldn't be real. But every time his eyes met mine, the walls I'd built to keep reality in check crumbled a little more. One night, while finalizing data for the investor summit, we stayed late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. I was hunched over my laptop when I felt him behind me. "You missed something in the projection formula," he said softly. I turned around and looked up at him. "Where?" He leaned closer. "Cell G14. You forgot to adjust for quarterly carryover." I clicked through the spreadsheet, heat rushing to my face from the nearness of his body. "Right. Thanks." His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "I wasn't talking about the spreadsheet." I turned slowly. Our eyes locked. "I've tried not to cross a line with you," he said, "but I'm done pretending I don't want to." My breath caught. "I don't want this to be a mistake," I whispered. "Then don't treat it like one," he replied. Before I could respond, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my skin, and I felt the world fall away. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and kissed me. There was no rush, no pressure, just the soft weight of his lips on mine, and the moment he pulled back, I knew something had shifted forever. He looked at me, breath shallow. "Come home with me." I hesitated. My heart screamed yes, my brain screamed run, but then I said it softly, certainly, "Okay." His penthouse was everything I expected: glass walls, stone floors, an open view of the city that felt like standing at the edge of the world. But the moment I stepped inside, it wasn't the luxury that hit me, it was how quiet it was, immaculate, empty, like no one really lived here. Julian poured us wine and sat beside me on the leather couch. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Finally I said, "Is this really happening?" He looked at me. "I've wanted this longer than I care to admit." "But your boss," he finished. "Which is why I didn't act sooner." I nodded. "And now?" He didn't answer with words. He leaned in again, and this time the kiss deepened. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and my heart pounded with something more than just adrenaline. It was clarity, certainty. It wasn't about status anymore, or attraction, or even that message. It was him and me. Something neither of us expected but couldn't ignore any longer. That night, everything felt like electricity. The way he moved, the way he touched me, like he was memorizing every second. When the city outside the windows faded into the dark, we were wrapped together in silence, in something that felt like more than just heat. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous and beautiful. The days that followed were delicate. At work, we remained professional, at least on the surface. But behind closed doors, it was impossible to pretend we hadn't crossed that line. And once that line was behind us, neither of us wanted to go back. Until someone found out. It started with whispers, a glance from HR, a knowing smirk from a senior executive who passed me in the hallway and muttered, "Nice promotion path." Then came the email, an anonymous message, forwarded to me, to him, to the board. Subject, conflict of interest? Attached were grainy photos from the hotel terrace. Him, me, too close, too intimate. Julian called me into his office that morning. His jaw was tight, his eyes harder than I'd ever seen. "They're calling an emergency meeting," he said. "They want a statement." I felt like the ground was dissolving beneath me. "What does that mean?" I asked, voice shaking. "It means they'll ask me to end this." I stood frozen, the air too heavy to breathe. "And what will you say?" He looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. Regret, fear, and something deeper. "I'll tell them the truth," he said, "that I let something personal cloud my judgment." My stomach dropped. He reached for my hand. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't lose this company." "So I'm the mistake now," I whispered. "No," he said, "you're the only thing I'm not sure I deserve." Tears pricked my eyes. "Then why not fight for it?" "Because if I fight, they'll come after you, not me." That was the last thing he said before I left the office. And didn't come back. I sent my resignation that night, packed up everything, disappeared from the city. He didn't reply. No message, no call, just silence, and the echo of a kiss that had felt like forever, until it wasn't. 3 months passed. 3 months since I walked out of Maddox Enterprises, since I shut down my email, deleted his number, moved out of the city. Since I stopped trying to explain to myself how a single misfired message had upended everything. I found work at a small nonprofit upstate, the kind of place where no one wore suits and the only boardroom was a picnic bench. I processed grants, coordinated outreach programs, and tried my best to forget that I'd once kissed a billionaire on a terrace under the stars. But forgetting was impossible, because the memory wasn't just about him. It was about the girl I had become when I was with him. Bold, seen, alive. And every time the silence stretched between us, I felt the ache of losing that part of me more than losing him. Then one morning, an envelope arrived. No return address, no name inside, was a single card. "I still don't regret asking when, JM." I stared at it for a long time, my fingers trembling. That afternoon, I got another surprise. He showed up, not in a limo, not in some tailored Armani suit. He wore jeans, a navy sweater, no security, no press. He found me in the small community center kitchen, chopping onions for an event. I turned and froze. Julian Maddox stood in my doorway like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His eyes searched mine as if checking I was real. "I didn't come to ask you back," he said softly. "I came to ask you forward." I set the knife down, heart pounding. "Forward?" He stepped inside. I stepped down. I blinked. "From your company?" "From the title, the day-to-day. I handed it to the COO last month." "Why?" I whispered. "Because building an empire means nothing if you're alone at the top. I realized I wasn't protecting you by pushing you away. I was just protecting myself." Again. I felt the tears rising before I could stop them. "I loved you," I said, "and I walked away because I thought you didn't love me back." "I didn't know how to," he said. "Not until you left." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a velvet box. My heart stopped. I thought power meant control. But the moment I lost you, I lost all of it, and that's when I understood what it meant to really want something, not to own it, but to be worthy of it. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, unlike anything I expected from him. "I don't need grand gestures," he said. "I just need to know if there's a version of your future that still includes me." I didn't say anything. I stepped forward. wrapped my arms around him, held him like I'd never let go again. Then I whispered into his chest, "Ask me again." He leaned back, smiled for the first time in months, and said, "When?" And this time I smiled back, "Now." We didn't announce it with headlines or hashtags. There was no press release, no viral photos, no red carpet. Just two people, once strangers in a glass office, now walking side by side down the quiet path of something real. Julian learned to slow down, to breathe, to laugh more often. I learned that I didn't have to dim my light to fit into someone else's world, especially when that someone was willing to reshape his world just to make space for me. Our story didn't start perfectly. It wasn't polished or planned. It began with a mistake, one wrong swipe, one embarrassing message. But sometimes that's all it takes to crash through a life lived behind walls. Love doesn't always announce itself with clarity. Sometimes it arrives messy, inconvenient, completely out of sync with logic or timing. And yet it's in those unexpected turns that we often find what's most true. He used to measure life in deals and deadlines. Now he measures it in moments, like late-night walks, coffee on the terrace, laughing in the middle of nowhere, or the way I still call him sir when I'm teasing him. And me? I used to think I needed to prove myself to be worthy of love, but love, the real kind, doesn't ask you to prove anything. It sees you, all of you, even the parts you're still figuring out. So if you ever feel like one mistake defines you, or that one misstep ruined everything, remember this: sometimes the wrong message ends up being the right beginning. And sometimes replying when is just another way of saying, "I'm ready for you, whenever you are."